And welcome back, everybody, to the Podcaster Nation. My name is Rory Paquette. I'm your host. You know that at this point. Folks, I love this. I love my job. I love you guys. I love this podcast. This is the place that is for podcasters. It's about podcasters, and it's done by podcasters. And my guest today is, you guessed it, a podcaster, amongst other things. This lady's incredible. She's done all kinds of things, including living in Germany for quite a while. So we're in for a treat on some things that we don't normally get to hear about here on the Podcaster Nation. This is the place where the rising tide raises all ships, and all of the podcasters come together to help each other out, listen to each other's stuff, guest on each other's podcasts, and help each other rise. So buckle your seatbelt and let's get rolling. I'm going to take a real quick sip of my preferred beverage before we get going. It's a little early over here in Indiana. Oh, there we go. I think I'm right as rain now. All righty. Let me introduce my guest today. We have with us the host of the ExPat Chatter podcast, also blogger and author, Brenda Arnold is with us today. How you doing, Brenda?
I'm good. Thank you.
All
Thanks
right.
for having me.
And you are joining us today from, let me just see if I get it right, Zorneding.
That's almost right. Yeah, the Z
Oh,
is like a T. There you go. Zorneding.
Zorneding.
Yes.
I had it better in the pregame. I had it better.
Good enough. Good
All
enough.
right, in Germany. So,
That's right.
let everybody know who is Brenda, and what are you doing in Germany, and why are you with
Yeah.
us today? Good to see you.
Well, thank you. Well, yeah, it's a long story, but really, I've been here for over 30 years, and I came here because of my husband. People say, "Oh, what brought you to Germany?" Excuse me. And it all started with a blind date. I'm originally from a suburb of Cleveland, Ohio, and I met my husband on a blind date. And we went to an Indian restaurant, and there was sand in the spinach, which made us start laughing. And basically, one thing led to another. I was in college at the time. I was going to Georgetown University, and he was living in New York City doing an internship at the United Nations. And yeah, we visited each other during college breaks. And before I knew it, I was living in Munich. I thought I'll just come and give it a try and see if I can find a job. And I found a job very quickly because in Germany, if you speak English as a native language and speak a few other languages, which I do, yeah, I found a job within 6 weeks and I didn't realize I wasn't going to go back, but I never went back.
Wow, so 30 years you've been there without
I've
coming
been
back.
over 30 years. That's right.
My
Yeah.
goodness. Okay, and your podcast is called Expat Chatter,
Right.
and you told me a story about what the expat means. Why don't you let everybody else know?
Sure. So expat is short for expatriate, which is what most Americans living here call themselves. We're really immigrants, and expat or expatriate is really the term used for someone who intends to go back to their home country. But sometimes there's a bit of a blurred line. People don't know if they're going to go back, which was in my case too. I didn't know that I was going to leave my country forever, so thought of myself as an expat. In the meantime, I'm pretty sure I won't go back to America, which is fine. Um, so that's the idea. So expat chatter is about and sort of an outsider's view, what things look like from American eyes living here in Germany, because it's a different culture, different language, and you are always encountering things that are just surprising, funny, or weird, and that's what I write about.
Wow. Okay. Now, when somebody just packs up and leaves, the country, that's kind of like you don't really hear that often. That they just take off and they're in another country and they just adopt that country. So have you officially sort of like in America, I know we have the green card system where you
Hmm.
become, sort of a permanent resident. Have you done that in Germany where you're a permanent resident of Germany now?
Yes.
I see.
So I
Wow.
did that. I did that, yeah, many, many years ago with my very first job. They had to apply for a work permit for me. And when you have a work permit, then they give you also residence permit. And then it's renewed periodically. And then at some point, it became an unlimited residence permit. And in the
I see.
meantime, just recently, they changed the law in Germany. So you do if you get German citizenship, you don't have to give up your other original citizenship because I never wanted to give up my American citizenship. So
Sure.
I've applied for German nationality now, and the papers are in the works. But that's a recent change. But up until then, it was not a problem because I have my residence permit is unlimited anyway, so not an issue. Because Germany has quite a few foreigners now. That's changed quite a bit over the past 20 or 30 years. Germany has a very huge export economy, and they also rely on many of these people who come from other countries who speak other languages. If you look at Germany on the map, you can kind of see why. It's surrounded by other countries.
Hmm.
So that back going many, many centuries, Germany has been focused on exports, and that makes them very open to other cultures.
I see. So you went there originally for your husband, and now you're staying, of course, for your
Right.
husband and because you love the country. You love being there.
Yes, I do. I do. And I should say one of the things when I was growing up was my big dream, living in a small town in suburban Ohio, was to go actually to Spain because I discovered that I had a talent for foreign languages. And of course, in American high schools, I think the biggest, the most popular language that they teach is Spanish. And I discovered I was quite good at Spanish. And I felt a little bit frustrated and claustrophobic in my hometown. I thought, well, I think I want to go to Spain. So I saved up my money as a teenager, working at McDonald's, working at the local sandwich shop. And right out of high school, I went to Spain for a year. I lived in Salamanca, which is sort of between Madrid and the Portuguese border. And I just loved it. I just loved exploring a different culture, learning the language even better. And it was just so much fun, just kind of like a permanent scavenger hunt in a way, always discovering new things. And then when I went back to the States, I realized that I really missed that. So I think that kind of prepared me when I met this German guy. I thought, oh, that's kind of cool, a European. I really liked living in Europe. And then when he finished his internship in New York and went back to Germany, that was a big draw for me. And when I graduated from college, I got a job that I didn't really like. And then I thought, maybe I'll just try going to Germany. And then I did. But I'm sure the year in Spain prepared me for that. It wasn't completely strange. I was ready for the culture shock, and I knew that it would take me a long time to learn the language.
Okay, and I think maybe yeah, that's because I'm sitting here going, how many people would just say, maybe I'll go to Germany?
Yeah, right, right.
But
Well,
you had
and
already gone to Spain, and so you
I
had
had
kind of
gone to
gotten a lot of
Spain.
the fear of going
Right.
to another country, and everything was out of your system.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I should say, of course, when I went to Spain, it was much more of a of a shock, if you will, to my system. I'd never been anywhere. I'd never even flown on a plane, actually. Um, but because of that experience coming to Germany and meeting my husband here, my boyfriend at the time, it was a lot easier in a way because he was sort of my cultural translator. Because you encounter weird things or you have a strange conversation with someone. Say, how come this guy reacted so weird? He'd say, we don't do that here. We don't, for example, Germans, for a German, Americans are over friendly. I mean, for us, it's being normal, right? So, well, yeah, of course we're friendly. And for them, it's a bit overbearing. And of course, I was doing that when I first got here, was being super friendly. So, hey, how you doing? And Germans are like, what's wrong with this woman? I'm like, why are they being so mean? They're not being mean, they're just being German. It's just a different cultural thing. But because my husband had spent a year living in New York, he knew all of that. So he was able to really hold my hand and help me through those difficult cultural encounters. And of course, it takes a while to get used to it. And of course, then the language comes in addition to that. But
I was going
all
to
a
ask
big
you.
adventure. Yeah.
I was going to ask about that because I mean, obviously, move to another country, you have to, take on the language. But I
Yep.
noticed in your podcast in several places you mentioned how many people learn English and how English is sort of spoken everywhere else, but America doesn't bother to learn these other languages. I think in one of your
Yep.
episodes.
Yep.
And so, what was it like having to learn a whole new language so that you could function the way you wanted to, or was it still fairly livable just speaking English?
No, I definitely needed German from the very beginning. So my first job was actually, excuse me, my first job was working for the an organization called the International Basketball Federation, which used to be located here in Munich. They're now in Switzerland, like all the other sports federations. And at the time, it was very small. There were only, I think we had 10 people, and English was spoken a lot in the office, and everybody in the office spoke several languages. French, English, German, Italian, and some Spanish. And they actually, that was the reason I got the job. They wanted someone who spoke fluent Spanish because no one else did.
Hmm.
Um, so I was able to speak English with my colleagues, but I definitely needed my German as well. And if you, especially answering the phone, I mean, nowadays everyone does everything by email. Now, at the time, there was no email. Um, so it was very harrowing to pick up the phone, have somebody, a German, not knowing that my German was still kind of in its early stages, and just fire away. And then I would just start sweating and say, can you repeat that, please? And anyone who's ever learned a foreign language knows it's really, really hard on the phone because you don't have any facial expressions, no body language. Is this person, are they rolling their eyes at me? I mean, is this really stupid what I'm saying? I just don't understand. It's really hard on the phone. So that was it. That was difficult. But you get through it. And the thing about learning a foreign language, you have to be ready to make a fool of yourself. You can't skip that stage. Many people think they can. No, you can't. You're going to make a fool of yourself. It's okay. It's okay. You're not stupid. You're just learning a language.
Yeah.
Um, so I got through that, and yeah, it's basically, and again, learning Spanish had taught me that you just have to keep pushing, ask questions, accept the corrections. It's fine.
Wow. I just I I took a foreign language in high school, like I think we all did at some point, but and I decided to take French, and so I could probably go to France and function enough to pick out a sandwich. Like that might be it. You know, I might be able to call a cab. But the translator on my Google Drive would be like working
Yeah,
overtime because I don't remember
yeah.
hardly any of it. I mean, do you feel as though you have a knack for that kind of thing? Because to be fluent in so many languages, it's seems like it's a gift or a talent.
I think that's true. And I think because I know other Americans who've been here as long as I have, and they can't, they speak German, but they speak it with a very heavy accent
Hmm.
and with difficulty. It is, I think, a special talent. And of course, the younger you are, the easier it is, of course. You see this in the Scandinavian countries where they begin as a very young child and they all speak excellent English, or in the Netherlands. Um, and of course, the United States, they start very late with languages and don't really push it either.
Right.
But
Yeah.
I also know in my family, so I come from a family of musicians. We all took music lessons as kids. And my older brother, for example, he always taught music and plays several instruments. And he never really learned a foreign language. But whenever I see him, he always asks me to say a few things in German and he'll repeat them and he repeats them flawlessly. So I think it has to do with music.
Hmm. So do you feel like language is an art then, as opposed to a
Mm.
science in terms of how you learn it?
Oh, I think that's true. I think that's true because there are many things in a language that don't make any sense. They just are, right? I
Right.
mean, I've also taught English and people say, but that doesn't make any sense. And I say, I just teach the language. I didn't invent it. So just go with it, okay? Just embrace it, imitate what you hear, and just be comfortable that no language is completely logical.
Yeah, nice. I do want to commend you out just sort of off the record a little bit here, even though we're still recording, because you are battling a cold and you are doing a fantastic job of powering through
Thank you.
and
Thank
and
you.
making
Yeah.
this work. So I know it's not
Thank you.
easy to hook up
Yeah.
from Germany to the United States around scheduling. So I appreciate what you're doing and getting through it all.
Sure.
But that's always been fascinating to me. the whole language barrier because I personally know people who are multilingual in 3 or 4 languages. My brain just simply can't fathom that. Just can't. You
Well,
know.
and I think again, it's if you start at an early age, it's infinitely easier.
Hmm.
Um, but again, in the US, because English is kind of the lingua franca of the world, you can go almost anywhere with English and get through, which is nice. On the other hand, it's a bit of a shame because it offers you a window into other people's worlds. And in Germany, for example, everyone says, "Oh, all the Germans speak English." Well, that's not really true. So if you're here as a tourist, you go to Munich, you go to Hamburg, Frankfurt, I don't know, the big, or do you go all the castles? Well, of course, the people you encounter there are going to speak English. But if you go to small towns, forget it. Um, the older people are not going to speak English, and it's a shame. It's a shame that you can't. If you live in a country, my opinion, you really need to learn the language because otherwise you'll never be able to access that culture.
And you did a podcast episode on that, talking about how it's a shame that Americans aren't experiencing these other cultures.
Yes, absolutely.
Hmm.
I mean, because America, if you look at it, it's really the United States is a giant island. Really. I mean, huge. But Canada to the north has a very similar culture. They also speak English. Of course, they also speak French. Um, and to the south, yeah, you have Mexico, which is true. But I think most of the Mexicans who live along the border probably speak English. And because America is such a huge economic and political power, it's easy to get along without learning another language. But it's a shame. It's a loss. And the world would be a different place if all Americans or even a third of them spoke another language. I'm quite confident that would change many things.
I see. You mentioned, I think, in your podcast, a conversation that you had with somebody, and you said, they said, "Well, where are you from?" And you said, "Well, from Germany." And they were so lacking of knowledge of the culture and everything else that they couldn't even continue the conversation with you.
Yeah, yeah, I'm afraid so. I particularly remember being at an airport, just waiting for my brother to arrive, and I just started chatting with the guy next to me, and he said, "Oh, where you from?" "I'm from Germany." And this was a few years ago, okay, when there were still two Germanys. And he said, "Oh, you're from Germany, from East or West?" And I thought, "Are you seriously asking me that question?" And I said, "Well, what do you think?" And he said, "Oh, probably West." And I said, "Yeah, that's a matter. That's true." And this guy was a school teacher. And that really shocked me. Yeah, it's amazing. And I think a lot of Americans, there's a huge influence of Hollywood, all the movies that you watch. World War II movies are still very, very popular, and it's shocking to see how many people still associate Germany with the Nazis, even though it's been 80 years, which just goes to show you how little exposure they have to the modern Germany, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can understand that though because I'm Italian by heritage, and everybody still only thinks of Italians and the mafia. So
Oh,
that's I get
not
it.
even pasta? Not even
Yeah,
pasta?
not anymore.
Oh
Just
no. Oh
because they
no.
America's just taken. Olive Garden took it all, so we don't have anything
Okay.
left.
Oh gosh.
But
Okay.
now you and your boyfriend turned husband, you raised a family in Germany.
Yes,
So
that's right.
what was you started talking briefly in our pre-interview about some of the challenges, raising kids,
Yeah.
but what was that like?
That was huge. It's funny when I had kids, up until that moment when I had my first baby, I thought that I knew everything there was to know about Germany, was I guess a little bit cocky of me. And then I realized there was a whole nother world regarding children's schools, preschools, all this. I didn't have a clue. And that was a rude awakening. And I also realized that I would have to have some kind of a strategy to raise my kids bilingually. So I had a friend, an American friend, her kids are a little bit older than mine, and I asked her. The advice is simple, but it's hard to do. She said, "Oh, it's easy. You just speak to your kids. You speak to them in English, and your husband speaks to them in German. And when they answer you back, if they answer you back in German, repeat it back to them in English. Because, of course, children absorb what they hear and they don't have a concept of what language is. So they just repeat what they hear. And they don't understand if they're just one or two. that it's a cool thing to learn two languages. They don't know anything about that, but you can guide them along the way, and it worked fine. I was very rigorous about only speaking English, and my husband only ever spoke German. And they grew up bilingually. I read them English books, and they were only when they were old enough to watch movies and things, I only ever showed them English language things because I knew living in Germany, they would be inundated with German media and other German speakers. And when they went to preschool, they were all German kids, of course. So immediately kids are very smart. So they hear German around them and say, oh, I need to speak like this to these people. And when I'm with the mom, I speak to her in a different way. And then when they're older, they realize that these are actually two different languages. So, yeah.
Wow. So it's mom's language and dad's language, and they just learn it because they
Yep,
need to.
absolutely. And if you
Wow.
had a grandmother who was speaking Russian and they had enough contact with her, they would also learn that because kids they pick up languages really fast.
Wow. I've heard that said that, young children, they're not actually learning skills, they're avoiding barriers. Like what we do is put barriers up for them as they get
Oh,
older instead of, they're already open. So just treat
yeah.
them like they're wide open.
Yeah.
That's wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So that worked then, obviously. You did that for all your kids?
Yeah, I have two daughters, and actually now they're grown. They're in their 20s and they're at college in Berlin. But it's kind of funny because they accuse me. They said, "Well, actually, you kind of overdid it with the American culture thing, Mom." Because now they feel, I think they feel like they're kind of torn between two countries in a way. I mean, I think they inherited my humor. I mean, for sure the language, and they read English books just as well as they read German ones, which of course is a great gift, right? That's the greatest gift you can give to your kids is
Sure.
another language, right? Um, but I mean, you don't know, or you just do your best as a parent, and I wasn't in a position to impart any German culture because I'm not German. That's yeah,
Well,
but
why do they feel like you went overboard on it? Are they experiencing something that's
well, I think
rough?
no, not rough, but I think they identify maybe more strongly with American culture than German.
Ah,
I
okay.
think probably because my husband was also on a lot, he was traveling for business a lot. So I guess I was the primary care provider, and that probably played a role.
Sure.
Um, yeah. But as I said before, there are many, many people in Germany who are immigrants, whose parents are immigrants. So you kind of have a foot in each country, which I think is really an enrichment more than anything else.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't imagine how it wouldn't be, especially in today's
Yeah.
world. Everything's so
Yeah.
global. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
absolutely.
Fascinating.
Absolutely. Yeah.
What made you want to 130 episodes ago start doing a podcast talking about all this?
Well, I think I come from a family of joke tellers and storytellers, and I think that was part of it. I think so my podcast started as a blog. I started just writing down little anecdotes, strange, funny, interesting things that happened to me or things that I discover. German history is very rich, very interesting. And I think also the interaction between German and American culture is also fascinating. There's a long history of German immigration in America. Just for instance, I mean, there's a zillion different things. Most people don't realize. So in Germany and across Europe in 1848, there were a lot of revolutions. Democracy was growing, and there were a lot of autocratic governments in power. And across Europe, many of the people revolted against their governments and wanted to have more democracy. And this famously failed in Germany, and it was crushed by the Kaiser. So a lot of these Germans packed up and left, and they went to America. Well, then along came the Civil War in 1861. Yeah, guess who was fighting in the Civil War on behalf of the North mostly? Because these Germans had already been fighting. And I mean, how weird is that? And you have these kinds of crisscrosses in history all over the place. And there were also, I mean, most people know, also in the Revolutionary War in America, the Hessian mercenary troops from Germany also played a pivotal role in defeating the British. So I mean, it just goes back and forth. The history of Germany and the United States has been interwoven for many centuries, which is, I think, fascinating.
Absolutely, it is. And that's wonderful. So you started with the blog, you moved over to the podcast, and then you mentioned to me that you have a book that you're putting together that you said was more of a memoir. Tell us about that.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. Yes, that's almost done. I've been working on this book on and off for over 10 years, and it's about my journey in coming to Germany and integrating and the process of integrating and how it changes you over time. I started out with there's also a bit about how I went to Spain and was so fascinated by that culture that that I kind of got a taste for living in Europe, and then went to college, and then came here. And of course, over a period of over 30 years, um, living in another country changes you, and you have to adapt. You have to learn new things. And as I mentioned before, having children was a whole new chapter, and it makes you question your own background because I mean, I come from a family of five children. We grew up in a typical American suburb with a big yard. Grew up playing frisbee and all that. And in Munich, well, we always lived in an apartment, and I have two children and not five. So it's a very different culture. So you have to come to terms with that. So, well, I didn't grow up that way and raise my kids that way. It's different here, different country, different time, and you have to come to grips with all of those things. And the memoir basically kind of traces that journey of exploration and adaptation. And also another thing, when you move abroad, you leave your core family, and then that changes your relationships to your core family as well, in oftentimes in painful ways. And then your parents age and pass away. Both of my parents passed away, and you're not there for that. You're far away. And then that's when it really gets to you, I think, because you can't be there to experience their decline. And then you go back for a visit after a year, and then you see them and you're just shocked. And these are the things that really hit home, and you say, wow, I live in a different country. I'm not experiencing that. Did I make the right decision? It's quite an ordeal. It's quite an ordeal.
Sounds like, yeah, it sounds like you definitely enriched your life by following this, but you also had to sacrifice quite a bit to go out there and with your husband.
I would say definitely. And I think when you leave your own country and live abroad, even if it's just for a brief period, it gives you a lot of admiration and respect for the courage that other immigrants had. I often think of the people who left Europe, and I mean, a couple of centuries ago, they gave up everything to leave. They sold absolutely everything, had nothing, paid with their ship's passage with their last money. It's like, okay, I'm going to America. And guess what? If you don't like it, it's too bad because you're in America now. You better do the best you can because you can't go back.
Yeah.
And if you think about that, it's mind-boggling. I mean, now you can take a flight, say, "Oh, this isn't working out. I hate the language. I don't like this guy." You know, what I'll just, I'll work a few more months, save up my money, and then I'll buy a passage back. Well, in those days, they couldn't do that, right?
Right.
Um, and we took a trip to New York City a few years ago. We went to the Ellis Island Museum, and that it really hits home. Because you read about these people, they leave and they never go back. You can't go back for a visit. Um, so I have a lot of respect. And as I mentioned before, I mean, so many foreigners here in Germany also, people from places like, China, Vietnam, or Poland, wherever. Well, Poland's a little bit closer. You can still go home there. But someone from Vietnam or China to come here and set up a restaurant, wow, what a challenge is that? And it's the same in the US, right? Yeah, all the thousands and thousands of immigrants who make their way, that's really hard to do. I think that's often underappreciated.
Wow. Absolutely fascinating your journey that you've taken, and just trying to experience even a little bit of it through your eyes, through your podcast is was very, very interesting. I really enjoyed listening to those episodes. So I love that you're doing what you're doing. You seem to love it also because you
I
continue to
do.
do
Thank you. Yeah, very
it.
much so. Very much so.
Let me ask you a couple of podcaster type of questions. We do have a lot of podcasters who listen to this, so I want to make sure we're taking care of them. When you first started podcasting, did you go out and get the big old expensive setup and the board and all that, or did you just, grab your phone or jump on your laptop?
Something in between. So I have a good friend who was already doing podcasts, and I asked him what I should do. I said, what kind of microphone should I get? And what kind of software should I get?
Uh,
And I just followed his advice, and then I just jumped in. Because it's such a big project, and there are a lot of little nuances. It's like, well, just try, just start. And the first few podcasts, I remember people saying, it's too soft. I can't hear you. I'm like, what am I doing wrong? And I had some kind of a setting wrong in my software, so I fixed that. Um, but my advice to people, just get started. And I mean, there's so many little hurdles to overcome. For example, just listening to your own voice. I think that can also be intimidating. When I first started podcasting, I thought, I sound like my sister. I mean, I do sound like my sister. Like, no, it's not her. It's me. It's actually me. So you get used to that. And of course, practice makes perfect. The more you do it, the better you get. And then you get feedback and just get started. And and the regularity is really important. I think I worked for 20 years in multinational corporations writing newsletters. And it's similar in the way that you're communicating things and you need a certain regularity. Um, you shouldn't make the mistake of making like one huge great podcast and then stopping and then 4 months later, no, no, no. To get started, but keep at it, right? You need some kind of regularity, or you're gonna any listeners you get, they're gonna lose them again. So, and just don't give up. Just keep at it.
nice, very nice. Now, how do you go about promoting your podcast?
Well, I need to do more of that. I think we talked about that before we
Sure.
started on air. Um, but I mean, there's no shortage of ways to promote it. I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, and I need to do more exploring about how to do that. I have a lot of LinkedIn connections because of my many years working in the corporate world. So that's another source. But I think because there are so many excuse me, there are so many channels. I mean, it's kind of like a smorgasbord. It's like, okay, pick your channels and then keep working on them and cross-reference your material. But now that I'm finishing my book, I plan to do more of promoting.
Deal, good deal. Well, that'll help sell the book too. So that'll be a good double-edged sword for you. Now, have you had a chance to work on monetizing your podcast at all? I know that's a question everybody always wants to ask. So
Yeah. No, I haven't. I haven't. That's something that's also on my to-do list.
good deal. All right.
Yeah.
So even at 130 episodes, you're still building. You're still,
I'm still
growing
building.
and
Yeah.
moving forward. I love
Yeah,
it.
I have some diehard fans and I have people speak to me and say, "Hey, I love your podcast. I'm great." Um, but I need to get more volume to be able to monetize it.
Sure. Gotcha. All right. Well, I always ask one corny question, and so here it comes. The corny question I ask everybody is, in terms of doing your podcast, what is it about doing your podcast that you love the most, and what is it about doing your podcast that you really just hate the most?
Hmm. Love the most. That's a good question. Um, I guess maybe when someone tells me that they really enjoyed an episode, I think that's what really does it for me. If someone speaks to me, I wish more people would comment online. I get most people that I know in my acquaintances say, "Hey, I listened to your last podcast. It was great. It was so funny. I really could identify with that." Um, so I always wish they put it online, but many people hesitate to do that.
Right. Exactly.
But I think it's the feedback really that you get for someone. So I so identified with that. Or I had an episode once about about how I overpack when I go to the States for a visit to my family because it's an emotional thing really. Think, oh, I'll give this to my sister, give this to my brother. And then you just get this huge pile of stuff in your suitcase. And you say, oh my God, I don't even have any clothes packed. I have all these things that I want to give to people because it's a way of maintaining this bond, right? So I talked about that, and a woman I know who's from Bulgaria, she listened to the podcast and she said, "Oh my God, I do exactly the same thing. I make a big pile of things for my mom and for my brother," and that really touched me. That's
Nice.
that's what I really like the most. Is I think also podcasting is about connecting with people, maybe even helping them if you can. Um, and of course, for me as a storyteller and joke teller, I love to make people laugh. So if people say, "Oh, that was really funny," that makes my day. Um, and I don't know about hating it. I don't think there's anything I hate, really. Um, no, I mean maybe if something is particularly difficult to edit, or if you make a mistake with your microphone setting and then you have to re-record, but really only technical difficulties. But as far as recording the podcast, I really enjoy it. So yeah.
Nice. So, what do you dislike about it the most?
Well, today I'm going to say when I have to cough. um, Dislike. So I guess in an ideal world, I think most people I know who like to create things, they would love to create and have a little army of helpers around them to do the promotion. Say, I'm gonna repost this to all these different channels. I'm gonna put this on Instagram, on Reddit or wherever. That would be nice. I don't particularly enjoy doing social media, so that would be nice. I think I would. That's something I dislike about the pot. I would love to just do the creation part. Have a little army of people to help me to put it out there. That would be an ideal world for me.
Having to promote it. Exactly. I
Yeah,
understand. I
yeah.
understand. No, I love that. Now you gave several pieces of advice a little while ago, and so normally I end with like an advice question. Is there you can either restate something that you already said, maybe drive the point home a little more, or hey, if there's something that you haven't mentioned yet that you think might be good. I always ask podcasters, especially folks who have done what you've done. 130 episodes is not nothing. You've been around for a minute. I usually ask them, what advice do you have for people who are just not quite where you are yet? And, maybe something that you've encountered that you want to warn somebody about, anything like that. What do you got?
Well, well, I would guess I would say that everybody has a story to tell. Um, I think I actually believe that also about people. Every person you meet most certainly has something interesting they can share with you that you didn't know before. So I think if people want to start a podcast, there must be a reason why they want to start a podcast. They've got something to say that other people have not said yet. So I think I would encourage them to have the courage to do that, to put yourself out there and share it, because I think it's also an enriching experience to share something of value. And and I can tell you from experience, when you get that feedback from someone that says, "Hey, that really helped me," I think there's nothing greater than that, really.
Love it. Absolutely love it. All right. I have to ask one more question. Is there, and maybe there's so many, so I'm not sure if you could even put this in words, but what do you think is the biggest or one of the biggest differences between living in Germany and living in the United States? I'm just dying to know.
Oh, I get that question a lot. It's a tough one. And this is going to sound very theoretical, but it's actually very true. I think the Germans have a very different view of the role of the government and the public, if you will. Germans feel, excuse me, that they feel that the government has a larger role to play and that it's a positive role. And Americans traditionally, and this has been going on since colonial times, they have, I think it comes it's the heritage that they brought over from England, right?
Hmm.
That get the government off your back. I think that comes from colonial times. So there's an ingrained belief in Americans that the less government, the better, because the government is bad. And I mean, I think this is particularly true now, but it was true 10 and 20 and 30, 50 years ago also. And Germans don't feel that way. They feel that the government is there for you and that the government has many important roles to play. And they hold the government to those roles. And they say, well, And it kind of it permeates all areas of life in Germany. Um, and also just the yeah, I think part of that also is the role that unbridled capitalism plays in the United States. There's a belief that capitalism will fix everything, and Germans don't believe that at all. They believe that the government should intervene to regulate the forces of capitalism, and you can see that throughout society and throughout the economy. And I know that sounds very theoretical, something from a textbook, but it's really true. And that helps to understand a lot about the different attitudes and cultures, I think.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, if I could have taken 10 shots at what you were going to say, I would have missed on all 10. That was really
Well, I'm
interesting.
glad I was able to surprise you.
You did on that last one. You really did. I
Okay.
mean, talk about taking a deep dive. I mean,
Yeah.
that was wonderful, though. Thank you for that answer.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, I tell you what, Brenda, it's been a pleasure meeting you and hearing your story and listening to everything you've had to say.
Thank
I
you.
cannot imagine making the sacrifice that you made to go out there and then living the life that you've lived. It's almost beyond my comprehension. I love hearing about it, and I love hearing about it on your podcast. So I hope you keep doing what
Okay.
you're doing.
Thank you so much. It's really been a pleasure.
Thank you. Folks, you've heard another awesome episode of The Podcaster Nation with another awesome podcaster, Brenda Arnold, host of ExPat Chatter. Look her up. They're smaller podcasts. They're easy to digest. They're full of really cool information. Uh, Go check her out and listen to her podcast. We got to support each other in this program. This is the place for it's about podcasters, it's for podcasters, and it's done by podcasters. This is the place where the rising tide raises all ships. So keep sailing.